Willow Creek Springs presents Healthy Living with your host, Joe Grumbine.
Well, hello, and welcome to the Healthy Living Podcast, brought to you by Willow Creek Springs. I'm your host, Joe Grumbine, and today I want to talk about accountability and healthy living. It seems like we live in this crazy world where people don't like to be accountable. They like to blame everybody else for everything. And I think that as we take responsibility for our own actions and realize that we're really the only one that can affect ourselves, that we'll find our way to the healthy living world a lot quicker and better. So this first part is called the magic moment. And the reason why I'm calling it that is, every moment really matters so much. Let's just start with that. Every single thing that we might talk about that has to do with healthy living begins with a moment, has a series of moments, and ultimately ends if it ends with a moment. And I think that sometimes we get lost in waiting, and we get lost in procrastinating, and we get lost in blaming, and we get lost in not doing, so much so that we lose the power of our moment. And, we live in a temporal world. We live in a world where, we have 24 hours of every day, and every single one of us has that. And maybe that is the one way we're equal. Maybe that is the one thing in life that is fair, is that we all get the same amount of time every single day. And so I want to spend some time in the moment about the moment. Now, to me, I think the greatest gift that we've all been given is the gift of free will. It's also kind of a curse or a responsibility, if you will, because, well, we have a free will. That means we're responsible. If we do it, we did it. It's on us. And I think that that's something um, to remember. So here's the way I see it. And again, I'm the guest on this podcast. I get to have the way I see it. I think that everything that has to do with health is affected by a number of things, but most importantly, it's the choices we make, the moments that we make these choices in. There's also genetic uh, influence. Some of us are lucky, we have good genes. Some of us are unlucky, we have bad genes. So we might have an ability or a symptoms or a situation or a syndrome or a disease or some kind of thing that we just really didn't have anything to do with. It just we are that way. We're born that way. Some people live a long time and they do everything wrong and they just still live a long time. Some people are skinny, no matter what they eat, no matter what they do, they stay skinny. Some people are naturally fit. There's just these athletic people out there that just naturally are good looking and naturally strong and naturally fast. Um, that's life. And that's more typical than not, certainly not fair. But then there's the environment. And some of these things we do control, others not so much. So for people that are impoverished and they live in places where there's toxic uh, chemicals or situations around them, well, you have a more difficult time in finding your way to a healthy life. Um, and I think that largely, if we want something bad enough, we can move ourselves in or out of an environment. But still, for many, many people in many situations, uh, maybe they don't see the options that they have. Then there's the difference between free will and willpower. Well, you have the free will to use willpower or not. So I think those are two factors that are involved with our moments, but certainly, I don't know if one's more important than the other. So let's start looking at moments. There's a first moment, there's a moment of awareness, there's a moment of inspiration, a moment of fear. What are all these moments all about, right? Every second, we just have had thousands of moments since I started this show. Or the whole show could be a moment, depending on your point of view. That first moment, I think, is one of the most difficult ones. So let's just look at ourselves. We're thinking about getting more healthy. We decide we're going to do something. Okay, well, that's a moment right there, a moment of decision. That's a powerful moment. The second that you say, you know what, I'm going to do this thing, whatever it is. Maybe I'm going to exercise or sleep or eat or whatever the change that we're going to make. That's maybe the most powerful moment. So to remember the power of a moment, the power of a thought, the power of an action, remember that every single thing that ever happened in a mind first. It happened as a thought. Before you worked out, before you ate healthy, before you did that thing you did, you thought about it. There was a thought, a moment of thought. I think those are the most powerful moments that there are. All the time we're thinking, right? Our little monkey brain's always going off, kick, 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 always singing that stupid song that won't get out of our head, going over our problems, going over maybe we're going over an affirmation or something positive. But again, these are all moments and they're happening and happening and happening. So you get into a decision to meditate. Maybe that's a really important moment. So I say, oh, you know what? I keep hearing about meditation. I keep reading about it. I keep seeing that it benefits people so much. I'm going to try it. And you sit down and you say, okay, I'm going to meditate. So there's your first moment. You thought about it. The second, you actually decide to begin. And maybe you take 6 deep cleansing breaths and you begin that. Each one of those breaths is a moment. And maybe you only last for 10 seconds or 15 seconds before your little monkey brain starts chattering again. Well, that was a moment of accomplishing something. So I think it's important to remember these moments and how important we talk about living in the moment. And I think that that's just a huge element of health, because so many times when we're not living in the moment, what are we doing? We're lamenting, we're thinking back, we're looking at, oh, if only, or I remember back when, or all of these things. Or maybe we live in a future moment. Like I said, if only, or I wish I could have, or all of those things. Those are all moments, but they're not real. We're never going to get to the future. It's like that old or that new little meme I seen of a guy standing on the street corner holding up a sign that says free beer, and then in small letters it says tomorrow. Well, whenever you go by to see that guy, it's always going to be tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes. Looking back on what happened, sitting in a bar, or not lamenting, commiserating. Um, there's some value to that, going back and thinking about things you did or didn't do. But for the most part, um, it's just time spent revisiting something that will never happen again, not ever. We live in a life that's like a river. It's never the same 2 minutes in a row, much less 2 moments in a row. So that first moment, I think, is really important. I think that there isn't anything that happens, there isn't anything that you accomplish, there isn't anything that you create that didn't have that first moment of hey, you know what? Or then there's that first moment of action when you actually say, okay, here we go. and I pick up the hammer and I start to drive that first nail. Then there's a moment of awareness. That's another powerful moment. So you're going through life, and sometimes you're seeking a knowledge or seeking an answer. Sometimes you just stumble upon something. They say, you can't unring a bell, and that moment is like ringing that bell. You have that awareness, the vibration goes out into the universe, and it can never be undone. You can never unknow something. So once you become aware, if you seek knowledge, if you seek wisdom, and you come into new experiences, new awarenesses, well, that's going to change your course quite a bit. There's a moment of willpower where you decide, I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to stay with it. One of the hardest things that I've ever done was make a decision to quit a substance. Like, I quit tobacco when I was 26 years old. Hardest thing I ever did, because we'll talk about addictions and habits and all those sorts of things. But it seemed that I always had a reason. I'm going to start tomorrow. I'm going to do this. And then one day I made that decision. And in my decision, I made a pact with God. And that was what helped me, give me that strength that I needed. But ultimately, it was a choice, it was a decision. And here it is, over 30 years later, I kept my willpower. I made a decision many, many, many times to stay the course and keep going. And today I can say it's been more than 30 years since I've done chewing tobacco. Well, I get a little something from that, but every moment I continue to not do that. So that's another thing that I think is really important. The power of this decision, these moments, it's important to think about some things because, your environment and your awareness affect your decision making, choosing what you're going to do in these moments. And, I've talked about fair, and Lord knows life is not fair. And this is one example of that. So when you decide to make a choice in the moment, and it's a choice that is a positive thing. So it's something that you're going to do or not do to better yourself. Well, I hate to tell you, but those choices, those are the weakest answers. Those are the weakest effects. So making that choice, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard every single time you do it for most people in most things. And it's because it's a positive thing. So I decide I'm going to eat vegetables and not eat sweets. Well, every time you see that sweet, you have to choose not to eat it. Every time you see that vegetable, you have to choose if you're going to eat it. And it's always going to be harder to do the thing that you aren't accustomed to or don't want to do. It's the power of that strong positive choice. Every time you choose not to do that bad thing, well, you just chose it and it happened. But you don't gain anything really from it, in the sense of, I can do something destructive and in a moment I can pull a trigger and end a life. I can strike a match and start a fire. I can just stomp on a sandcastle. I can do any kind of destructive things. I can say something that I know will cause harm. And the power of that moment is infinitely more powerful than the positive things. So just be mindful of these things. In my life, anyways, and again, really, that's all I'm ever talking about. If it's hard, it's probably good. If it's easy, it's probably not. And those are two balances that I use to decide or choose which choices I'm going to make in these moments. Put it on the scale and say, is it getting you towards your goals, or is it keeping you from your goals? In those moments, those are important to be aware of. There's moments of inspiration you get that moment, right? You see that pretty girl or that guy that you just go, oh my God, I need to, whatever. There's your inspiration. Or maybe you see a work of art, or you see a beautiful place, or you see a skinny person and you're not skinny, or you see a fit person and you're not fit. You have an inspiration, whatever it is, it doesn't matter what is that inspiration, but that's a moment, a powerful moment. And if you can take that moment and hold on to it in your mind, then you have it to keep you going. And then there's moments of fear, and they can be strong or difficult. You can have a moment of of being startled, or a moment of being afraid of something, and it can change you for the rest of your life. Or it can also be something that you choose to overcome. And so it's really, really important. I think one of the biggest moments that we all face every day are moments of procrastination. I don't know about you, but always the thing I should be doing, the most important thing, is always the thing that I put off to the end. And always that silliest, dumbest, least important thing is that thing I got to get to right now. Can't wait to see it. Can't wait to do it. And so these moments, every single time that you're getting yourself towards a goal or doing something difficult, just remember these moments, these moments. And then maybe this is something to think about too when it comes to influencing factors, things that get us to be healthy or not healthy, are feelings. And just remember, feelings and cravings and desires and all of those things that I think more often than not take us down a bad road than a good road, they only last a moment. So if you're angry, you know what's the old saying, count to 10 and you'll get over it. Well, generally that's good advice. I know when I was craving tobacco, I would just say no, and that moment would pass. Sometimes I'd have to say it 2 or 3 times, but really, these moments are just that. So let's take some time and think and make a decision to use your moments to bring you to the healthy life. Um, I just want to thank everybody who's been a part of this podcast, the Healthy Living Podcast. I'm grateful for Willow Creek Springs. I just so happen to be the CEO, but also I'm grateful that I have the company that we can sponsor this program. I'm grateful for everybody who's come on as a guest. And I encourage you, if you're listening to this and you think I've got something to say, it could have anything to do with healthy living, get in touch with me. I'm easy to find. And I hope you find this interesting. And here's a kicker. If you stuck around to the very end, I'm dropping an Easter egg. And so this Easter egg will obviously only come alive when the show gets uh, broadcast, but it's a $50 Willow Creek Springs Easter egg coupon. First person to come and tell me about it gets it. And that's all there is. It's a one-time Easter egg. All right, folks. Thank you. And this has been another episode of Healthy Living Podcast brought to you by Willow Creek Springs. Thanks. We'll talk soon.